Okay, so I picked an article on people worshiping the Virgin Mary as a goddess rather than obviously her original role. Okay, got it. So the answer is yes. Many people have started to worship Mary as a goddess rather than in her natural role that many people would imagine her as. Starting out the article, a woman named I want to say I don't know how to say her name right. Teresa. She grew up in a Catholic household, and she ultimately ended up converting to worship other gods, so leaving the Christian faith behind her completely. This is just one of the examples of people worshiping goddesses over a male god. But in this case in particular, she doesn't worship the Virgin Mary as a goddess. She still views her as she still views her as like a holy and sacred individual, just not someone to pray to or to worship in the role of a god. And this suggests that like Mary has her own power for many people. But again, it can be viewed. Everyone has their different opinion when they're worshiping goddesses. Like some people choose to worship Mary as a goddess, or they choose to worship other religions outside and choose other goddesses. Mary has been a tool for many years now for people to maintain the eyes of womanhood as submissive, obedient, and sexually pure for others. And this can kind of go in hand with the feminist anthropology, whereas women are kind of like categorized by their reproductiveness in their bodies and how sexualized they can be. So, yeah. And why did some people start to begin to worship Mary as a goddess or just other goddesses in general? This started in the 1960s and 70s during the women's rights movement. People began to worship goddesses because it fit into the ideas of what they wanted for women to be in power. So here's like the origin of people starting to worship goddesses. They started to worship the female gods over the male gods if some of them were hurt by male-dominated religions or male-dominated leaders, or if their church that they were in had a strong negative male presence that might have led them to start to worship goddesses over gods in that way. And a lot of people who do worship Mary as a goddess instead of her natural role, they still view her as obviously sacred and holy, even though there is no set religion for them. She's still a sacred and holy figure for them. And this is also can be related to gender roles, whereas most people would think when they hear God or God, they would think of a male god rather than a goddess. So many people are just assuming it's a male god, but for them it's going to be a goddess. And then a fun fact about people who worship goddesses, they're more likely to worship goddesses who have similar qualities as them or qualities that they would like to see in themselves or just qualities that they like in general. And for people that, like for Christians coming to worship Mary as a goddess rather than the Father, many of them who worship Mary now had reimagined Mary because obviously they knew her as one thing before the mother, and now they see her as the goddess instead of her original role. But she is still reimagined as a goddess because, like mentioned earlier, goddesses are usually over-sexualized and are powerful, whereas Mary is still non-sexual and still obedient. She just has her own power. And then for people who are converting from other religions, there's people that have completely converted from many different religions, they're also going outside of their beliefs and reimagining Mary because, like mentioned earlier, most goddesses are not going to be obedient, non-sexual, and pure as Mary is. So that is definitely something different for them, but they're going outside of their upbringings to worship Mary. And an example of that would be the Temple of Mary that is founded by Hetine Grobler. She converted from Hinduism, and she founded the Temple of Mary, and the temple has their 4 honors: the Virgin Mary, the Bride, the Mother, and the Wise Woman, which all fall under one person being Mary, kind of like how people, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, are all one. Something interesting about Groppler is that she believes that people in the Bible were real, but believes that they are metaphors. And there's a story of the Mesopotamian tales of Avianna, which is the goddess of love, war, and fertility. And then there's another god in the story who shepherds legends who had died and were resurrected. So kind of like that going in, like hand in hand with the resurrection of Jesus. I guess that's her idea of it. And this is different. This is a different example, obviously, from the beginning of this article, Teresa. Because obviously, Groppler honors Mary as a goddess, whereas Teresa left Christianity completely and doesn't worship Mary as a goddess, just sees her as a holy figure, not someone to worship, and she just worships other goddesses. So this is just one of the examples, but for Groppler, she believes that Mary was gifted divine nature by those who worship her, and that's how she got her power as a goddess. And then these are the references for the photos and the article.